guys, it's Angela, and today I'm going to be telling you about all the books I read in November. I'm sorry that this wrap up is late. I've just been super busy with school, but I'm almost done. I'm one final away from the finish line. But yeah, sorry that this wrap up is late. And before I get into talking about the 6 books I read during November, I just wanted to shout out my dad, who drove 3 hours to a different state actually to pick up 3 Billy bookshelves from IKEA. I absolutely love them. I totally get the hype with the Billy bookshelves from IKEA because they are so fantastic and I love them so much. And after he had made the 6-hour round trip to pick up these bookshelves for me, while building them, I tripped and fell through the back of one. Like through the back panel right to the other side, and I'll insert pictures. So that was a big fat yikes. Tape works wonders though. You can't really tell, but yeah, that happened. But enough blabbering, let's get into the wrap up. So starting with my 4-star books. As I mentioned, I did read 3 4-star books. And the first 4-star book is The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. This is the first book in a fantasy trilogy, and they are beautiful floppy paperbacks. Every time I talk about these books, I have to mention the floppiness of the paperbacks because you can't beat it. Anyway, this book is about a princess named Leah, and she's betrothed to a prince who she's never met, and on her wedding day she flees, which is obviously a huge deal, and now her father has put a bounty on her head. She fled because she didn't want to, be married to someone that she didn't get to choose. She didn't want to be a pawn in this whole big political scheme, because that's essentially why she was going to marry this guy. So she flees, and now there are 2 people after her, one of which is the prince who was supposed to be married to her, except for she dipped, and then the other person who's after her is an assassin, and they're both trying to track her down. But you don't know who is who when reading this book, so there's definitely like a mystery aspect, which I really liked. And you're constantly like going back and forth like, oh, could this be the assassin? Could it be the prince? Like, you can't really tell because you're reading from their perspectives. But overall, I really enjoyed it and gave it 4 stars. The next 4-star book I have is Death Note. And this is one of the first manga series that I've ever read. This says 2 on the front, so it's bind up 2, like bind up number 2, but within this book are volumes 3 and 4. So, like I said, I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, and I really like the route that the story is taking. It's definitely a morally gray book, because this is about a guy named Light who discovers a death note, and that is the notebook from the death god, who you can see here on the cover. And essentially, you write the name of someone who you feel should die into the death note, and they die, and you can pick the date, the time, and how they die. And if you don't specify those things, they'll just die from a heart attack. So Light initially uses this notebook to get rid of people whom he feels deserve it, such as like criminals who he feels haven't really served their justice or done enough time. And so, yeah, and then the story just goes into so much more. And I really love it. I love the black sprayed pages. It's a pretty quick read. And even if you're not really into manga, but you really like the idea of like a lot of morally gray characters, then I think you'd really like this. And the last 4-star book I don't have a physical copy of because I read it on audio, and that is Shil Girls by Claire Legrand. Now, going into this book, I really didn't know a lot, and I think that's sort of the best way to go into this book. It's essentially about this town, and a bunch of girls go missing, like individually one at a time, because of this evil entity. The book features 3 main characters, and it also features female-female romances, which I think were done really well, and I really enjoyed the book. I've heard some people say that they were let down because it was pitched to them as horror. So for me, I personally read a lot of horror, so if this book had been pitched as horror to me, I definitely would have been let down compared to the things that I've already read. So going into it, I think that you should know that it's sort of like, it's dark, it's spooky, it's atmospheric. There are sort of scary parts, but I wouldn't say all in all it's a horror book, which is something I feel that you should know going into it so you don't get disappointed thinking that it's going to be full-blown horror, because it's not. But that aside, it was very good and I did really enjoy it. So now into my 3 5-star books. The first 5-star book was Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell. And this is a graphic novel, obviously. I read this in November, although I had initially wanted to read it in October. Regardless, it was the perfect time to read this. This is a great fall graphic novel, but in my opinion, it's definitely a lot more than that. This book features our 2 main characters, who are right here on the cover. She's actually bisexual, and I thought that that was great rep, and it was cool within the story to see her interact with some of her ex-boyfriends and girlfriends. But this book is about these 2 people who are best friends, and every fall they work at the pumpkin patch together. And they really don't talk during the other 3 seasons of the year, but when fall rolls around and they begin doing their seasonal job at the pumpkin patch, they sort of pick up right where they left off. They're sort of like work best friends. And this book takes place during their last night working at the patch together. And so it's sort of like bittersweet to start off with because you know that they've developed this really good friendship and now this is kind of like the last night for it. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. The illustrations are so beautiful. I thought that it was so nicely done. It's sort of like the perfect amount of like cheesy, corny, definitely so many fall vibes, and it just makes you want to go to a pumpkin patch. And since fall is one of my favorite seasons, I definitely enjoyed that part too. And yeah, it was just really good and I would highly recommend it. And I thought it was a cute, fun fall read. And a lot of people say that they predicted what was going to happen. I didn't, maybe because things just fly right over my head. That could be part of it. But yeah, nonetheless, I enjoyed it. My next 5-star book was The Institute by Stephen King. Now, I hadn't anticipated picking this up in November. It just happened that my audiobook hold, it was my turn, and there were like 24 people behind me, so I was like, all right, we gotta get reading this. And this book is about a boy who ends up in an institute full of kids who have different sorts of extraordinary abilities. So if you don't already know, Stranger Things is my favorite show. I've got a Stranger Things Christmas sweater on. And it definitely gave me Stranger Things vibes. Specifically, 11 in the lab. How they're constantly doing testing on 11 to sort of figure out her abilities further. And also the way that they treat her is exactly what this book was like, except for with like 100 kids all being treated negatively and all having testing done upon them. And I really loved it, especially because it sort of gave me those Stranger Things vibes. I didn't expect, I guess, to love this as much as I thought I would. I thought it would be like a solid 4-star read, but it was a 5-star read. I loved it so much. I listened to it on audio, like I said, and the audiobook was great. I do want to eventually get a physical copy. It's also sort of pitched as like having like X-Men vibes too, if that's something you're into, Stranger Things, X-Men, or just kids with extraordinary abilities. I would definitely recommend this. If you haven't read any Stephen King yet and this sounds interesting to you, I would definitely recommend this. This is definitely one of my favorites that I have read from him. It just blew me away physically and emotionally. The ending made me cry, which I guess I'm just kind of soft, and I just really got attached to these characters that I didn't anticipate getting so attached to. And yeah, absolutely fantastic. Can't wait to get a hard copy of it. Would highly recommend. And the last 5-star book I read this month was Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, the Illustrated Edition by J.K. Rowling. Now, I've mentioned this once before on my channel. I read all of the Harry Potter books for the first time in 2018, so I haven't reread them since. And so this is my first time rereading the first book. And I have to say, reading the Illustrated Edition just immersed me so much further into the book. I mean, I cried at the end of this, and I know compared to the other books, like really nothing sad at all actually happens in this book, but I just sort of cried because I was just enjoying it so much, and I was just like sad that it was over. I don't know. I really enjoyed it. The 4th book, The Goblet of Fire Illustrated Edition, just came out recently, and that's what sort of got me to want to finally read these illustrated editions, because Goblet of Fire is one of my favorite Harry Potter books and movies. So yeah, I absolutely love these. Like I said, they're so immersive. The illustrations are so beautifully done. I loved it so much. And if you haven't read it already, I would highly recommend it. So those were all 6 of the books that I read during the month of November. I really enjoyed everything that I read, and I'm sorry that my wrap-up is up so late. Feel free to let me know in the comments what books that you read during November and loved. And thank you guys so much for watching, and have a good one.